I'm going to jump right into A8 because I'm going to allow you to just choose which one you want to work on. A8 is what I call the email extractor. And this one is a little bit different than what you've done in the past, but what we're going to do is we're going to use some of the advanced string methods and functions that we've talked about in Module 8. I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of text, and those pieces of text are going to contain email addresses. I want you to figure out how to get the email addresses out of that text and keep them in a list. And then I'm going to have you do some things with them. I want you to print them out after removing duplicates. Okay, don't forget about set for that. And then I want you to, I've also given you a list of email addresses, and I want you to scan through the email addresses that you pull from the text and see if it matches any of those lists. On this one, we're going to start with some text again, or a PI file, and it's on the assignment page, but it looks like this. Okay, so I've got your strings of text here, strtext1, strtext2, and the list of emails. This is for the purpose of finding out if any of these match any of these email addresses. So let me just start you with a little bit of logic, right, about how do we find email addresses? Now, you're looking at this right now, and your eyeballs are already picking out email addresses. Am I right? You're already seeing the email addresses in this. How do you know? How do you know if something is an email address? How are you recognizing an email address when you see it? The @ sign. Every email address must have an @ sign. Now, is everything with an @ sign an email address? No, right? We often use @ signs for like Instagram handles, other things like that, or just to abbreviate the word @ sometimes in text. So an email address has more than just an @ sign, right? It definitely has an @ sign, but this email address bill@bmosley.com, that's a valid email address. Tell me some other features that all email addresses must adhere to. Can you tell me anything else about the rules? There are definite rules about what an email address can and cannot have. They have to have a something. Excellent. So after the @ sign, we're going to be really specific about this. After the @ sign, they must have some characters, and then at least one dot, and then at least something. Now, it used to be .com, .net, .org, .gov. Like, there's a small number of things that could go here. Now there's like a million. .live, .blog, .whatever, .us, .me, .tv. There's a million of them. So all we know is something, it's at something .something. This is called the domain, by the way. So a domain can contain only certain characters. It can contain letters, it can contain numbers, and it can contain the underscore and the hyphen. That's it. So if you ever come across any of these other characters in a domain, you know that's not an email address. Or it's just something that came after the email address. So you've got to be aware of what things can and cannot be in an email address. Now, an email address must end in a .something. These are called a top-level domain. A top-level domain is the very end of your email address. And it used to tell us, or it's designed to tell us, what kind of organization owns that domain. So bmosley .com tells us that B. Mosley is a company that is a commercial entity. Is it really? No, it's me. But it is, according to this. But now that anybody can buy anything pretty much, there's a few restrictions on who can own what type of top-level domain. It's a little confusing. But the top-level domain has a few restrictions also. Can only be letters. That's it. No numbers. Also, it cannot end in punctuation. It must be letters and only letters. So if you have an email address at the end of a sentence and you get that period on there, you're going to have to scrape that off. So you got to watch for that, because that's the most common thing that will mess up your email address. And so what are the rules for this part? Pretty much the same as this part. Okay, everything before it can be a number, a letter, underscore, hyphen. Cannot be any other punctuation. And also cannot include spaces, by the way. An email address cannot include any spaces. So the minute you hit a space, you know you've left email address territory. So if I go through this text here, what I would suggest is let's use split on the space to give me email addresses that are words. Now, that will work just fine for many of these. It will give me clean email addresses. But there are some of these, as you scroll through, like this one, where it is in brackets. But not only that, when I split this on the space, that's what I'm going to get for that word. So I'm going to have to figure out, how do I get rid of that other crap? Because I don't want this all in my database of email addresses. So when I generate my spam message to offer everybody discounted prescription medication, right? This won't send because it's not a valid email address. So I've got to figure out how to get rid of the square bracket at the end. And not only the square bracket at the beginning, but everything in that direction. So I have dave@hotmail.com. Make sure Dave doesn't miss out on my fantastic bargains. So if I want to do that, here's what I recommend. Here's a logic structure for cleaning email addresses. Okay? So what I would recommend is splitting it at the @ sign. So you take this whole word, you split it again at the @ sign. That gives you hotmail.com in the bracket at the end, and it gives you everything else that was before it, TCP/IP and Dave, all the way to the @ sign there. First thing you do is you're going to go character by character and ask if those characters meet the rules. As long as they meet the rules until the period, you're good. And then after the period, it's only letters. And the first thing you hit that's not a letter, you stop. And you say, that's the end of that email address. On this side, it's exactly the same thing, but you're going the opposite direction. So what do? I just flip it and do the same logic as the first part. If I take this and I use our magic flipping slice, I can use the same logic that I did for this on this part. So I'm going through character by character in reverse order, and as soon as I hit something that I don't like, I stop. And that's the end of the email address. Then I take what's left and I flip it again so it's back in the right order. And then I use join with the @ sign string to put the email address back together. And I can return that whole thing. If I put all of that logic into a function, I can run every email through that and it'll just clean it up and return the good ones. So that's how a function can be created using that logic to return the email addresses that I want, cleaned up without pollution. So that's kind of how you would approach something if you're creating this. And by the way, just a little side note, this is how spam is born. There are Python scripts and scripts written in many other languages that just scour the internet, following links, going from website to website, looking for email addresses and harvesting them using these exact same methods. So two things about that. Number one thing, this actually has real practical value. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you decide to go into the spam business, please don't give me credit for it. Okay? I did not teach you this.